Hello.
Hi
Hi, Yana.
there.
Welcome. I'm really glad you could join me today. I'm Leila Alavi. I'm from Ipsos, Germany. I'm a UX researcher, and I have the great pleasure of talking with Yana Beranek today. She's head of our global UX community, and she's going to introduce herself a little further.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you today. So yeah, I'm the global head of UX at Ipsos. We operate offices in 90 countries at Ipsos doing market research and user research. Specifically, we have teams for UX in 25 markets now that serve over 40 countries. So we have a great reach and are really excited to share our experiences with accessible UX today.
So let's get right into it. Just for the setting, I'm a Middle Eastern influenced woman. I'm wearing a black turtleneck. I have dark hair that's up in a bun, and I'm sitting in a room with a white wall and some yellow flowers in the background. Maybe you want to
Sure.
shortly describe your setting as well.
You bet. I am I'm American, very generic, Eastern or Western European. Sorry, I'm not as good at this as you are. Blonde hair, blonde curly hair, wearing a black jacket and green shirt. Sitting in my apartment where you may be able to see some light coming in through the windows. It's a sunny day here in New York City.
Great, thank you. Let's get started. You wrote a paper on why accessibility is so important to all of us. And let's just start. Could you explain why accessible UX is crucial to brands today?
You bet. So, it's estimated that 1 in 6 people is living with a disability in the world right now. So that's about 16% of the global population. And that is the kind of self-reported number, but we know that a lot of people don't even recognize disability. And we're seeing that that number is increasing as our population ages. So we expect that businesses are going to have to become more and more aware of how they're serving people with disabilities, so that they don't lose market share, quite frankly, especially as people age.
And could you elaborate on that, on how this demographic shift impacts UX design process and
Sure.
brands in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah, I think especially with digital products, we see, as people's vision declines, it is hard to read small fonts. It's hard to see things on small screens. And we see a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily think of as having low vision using screen magnifiers or even screen readers. We also know that people's manual dexterity declines as they age, and so tap targets are harder to hit. Just generally, things are harder to manipulate and control as people's, hands maybe become arthritic. And so we know that there are limitations. We also know that mild cognitive impairment increases as we age, the chances of that. And so we do need to think about how processes can be simplified so that we don't overwhelm users with unnecessary information.
All right. You mentioned that people with disabilities represent a significant amount of disposable income in your paper.
Yes.
How does this impact how brands approach inclusive design?
Well, so it's estimated that people with disabilities have like $1.2 trillion worth of disposable income annually, and that does not include their caregivers. So there's a sizable market that could be reached. And so we need to make sure that we're designing so that products will work for them, because we do know that people will stop using products, websites, and apps that aren't accessible, not necessarily because they don't want to. Trust me, people want the same resources and tools and content. But if they can't use it, then it becomes a moot point in terms of not being able to actually access that content or features, or to use a site that, or app that maybe a lot of people use.
Right.
So a missed opportunity, especially in the market, thinking about what who you can serve and whether or not you can expand your market, or as these demographics, right, are aging, your market's actually shrinking. So it's a pretty important thing for businesses to be thinking about.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm looking forward to working on that in the future with you. Let's get to our next question. You also stated in the paper, accessible UX is good UX.
Yes.
Please tell us about that.
Sure. Well, you know, it does come back to that idea of simplification in many cases. Oftentimes, to make things more accessible, we need to strip out the things that are clutter. And that's a good UX principle, right? Uncluttered design, easy to learn, you know, reduced steps in a workflow, more integration that makes it possible for people to, you know, not have to log into multiple places or use multiple tools, but get everything in one spot. And so those things have become, you know, best in class practices too for products that really deliver, right? As things are simplified, more people understand, they're easier to learn, and they reduce the time that it takes for people to ramp up on new products. And also, when people can find things and use things, they're more likely to engage more deeply and more broadly with your products because things are just easier to learn.
It sounds great. That brings me to my next question. You discussed the concept of innovate from the margins to design for the masses. So
Yeah.
could you provide some examples of how designing for edge cases has benefited all users of the products you've tested? Or
You bet. I think, you know, one of the like most ubiquitous ideas that we maybe don't even associate with disability anymore is voice to text, right? So originally thought of as a tool for people who maybe can't see. It's become like something that we all use in different ways. We have, you know, smart speakers at home. We use voice assistants on our phone. It's become very common, and yet it was designed with the, you know, with accessible UX in mind and to create more inclusive products. And we've all had a chance to benefit from that.
absolutely. You talk about assistive technology as well, which includes software tools that convert visual content to audio and vice versa. How significant is it to code websites and apps that support these technologies, in your opinion?
You know, it's very important. What we have found is that it can be extremely frustrating for users of assistive technology like screen readers or Dragon Naturally Speaking if the website or app or tool has not been coded, because then suddenly people are stuck. Their screen readers can't move through the content in a normal way. The screen reader may skip over content that's important, or it may loop. We see this sometimes on in digital experiences where a screen reader sort of gets stuck in a loop in one corner of a screen and misses, you know, 80% of the content because it's kind of trapped. So it really does become a problem in that, you know, people with low vision aren't aware of what they're missing. But when we test with users and see how their assistive technology is not supported, it can be, you know, eye-opening in terms of realizing that, you know, that populations are missing entire parts of websites, entire features, maybe a set of search results, right? Because because they have failed to account for that when they're coding websites. I mean, we even see it in things like our PDF, right? The PDF of our paper that we wrote. It took considerable time and effort to actually make it accessible to a screen reader so that it catches all the headings, so that it moves through the content in the right order, and so that, you know, charts and tables are consumable for people that may not be able to, you know, to see it, or actually to, you know, if you think about people with dyslexia or dyscalculia, they, you know, they just may not be able to consume it in the normal way.
Okay. Thank you for that. You also conduct research on the online job seeking experience for people with disabilities. Could you share some of the key findings from that research?
Sure. So, underemployment rate for people with disabilities is quite high. And, it's not because people don't want to work. It's because there are significant barriers to finding, employment that accommodates them. I think some of the big takeaways were that, searching for jobs is really time consuming. Like I was mentioning, sometimes we see on these employment sites that the search results aren't accessible, or they might interrupt search results with an ad, which may indicate to a screen reader that that's the end of the content on the page. So if you're not in the top 3 search results, your job, while you may have a list of 100 jobs, the user of the site may not realize that there are more jobs available. We also know that people have found out that while in many countries there are requirements to make job accommodations, the reality is that employers may not do that. And so users really wanted to be able to contact someone to understand accommodations and to actually arrange for accommodations for something like the interview, right? Because if you can't
Yes.
even get on to the interview, you've got a serious problem. Yeah.
Are there any other ways this lack of accessibility in the online job application process impacts the unemployment rate among people with disabilities? You can
Well,
think of.
yeah, I mean, I think that you do see people underemployed, right? And so they may be stuck in jobs that are well below their competency levels. I mean, when I meet people with disabilities, many of them have advanced degrees. They may, a lot of them work in the legal space because they're interested in advocating for themselves, and yet trying to find the right job is not a good fit. They often have to use other employment sites. One of the big barriers is actually the application process. So they might find a job online that they're interested in, but when they go into the application process, it doesn't support their screen reader. And so they only get maybe halfway through, or they might even get the whole way through and aren't able to submit, which is incredibly frustrating. So a lot of times they self-select out of the standard tools that many of us use to apply for jobs online because they are fearful of wasting their time. And they instead go to sites where they can apply for jobs that are through agencies and organizations that they know will provide accommodation accessibility. But that means that we're missing the benefit of having people with disabilities as part of our diverse workplace. And so, I think everyone loses out when we don't make online employment sites, job sites, and the application process more accessible.
I couldn't agree more. There's this great video at the moment with promoting this thought of assume that I can, so maybe I will.
Yes,
And I think we should all think of that more often.
for sure.
Well, in your work, you stress the importance of conducting accessibility research, as we've heard. Could you share some of your top tips for those who are new to accessibility research? What should we look out for?
So I think one of the first things is to plan for more time. So, more time throughout the whole cycle. You need more time to recruit. Your sessions are probably going to take longer. You need to prepare for time to set up technology and make sure that the participant is able to connect with you. And you also need to be mindful of the fact that participants may tire more quickly. And so you don't want to shove everything into a session, which I know sometimes we find ourselves or our clients tempted to cover everything. And I think in the case of working with people with disabilities, you need to recognize that that while they are eager to participate, there may be limitations on the amount of time that they are able to, be online. Oftentimes they may also need a caregiver to help them participate. So just generally being more flexible and thinking about taking more time. Another thing I would say is if you can find, we have consultants that we work with who can review research design and our setup with us, to make sure that we're designing the research well, but getting the input of people with disabilities as you're designing your research, designing your mod guide, and designing, the questions that you're seeking to ask or understand is really important. So we do try to involve people with disabilities in the preparation for the sessions. And then often now we do see that it may be easier for people to participate from home, which is a benefit from, really the pandemic lockdown of all of us learning how to use these remote tools better, just like our conversation today. And so I think that really thinking about what's the best way for people to participate. Do they want to participate from home? Do they want to come to a facility that they're used to visiting, where they may have caregivers or people who can help them participate in research? So really thinking about what's the setup of your research. Those are a few tips that I would have. A lot of preparation and for the sessions really helps to make them successful. And I think preparing your stakeholders to understand that there are going to be these limitations and these obstacles, but we need to learn from them and embrace them and not get caught up in thinking that because of the obstacles we shouldn't do it. And so by giving everyone a heads up that you need more time, I think it prevents us from getting too frustrated when people think that research has to be done so quickly. Because I don't think anyone ever said to me, Yana, take as much time as you want for this research, right? So really setting the table around that need for a realistic timeline.
Unfortunately, I haven't heard that in my research either. Let's dig a little deeper in that. So you've mentioned allowing for more time, thinking of co-designing the research from the beginning, co-creation with the people impacted, and also preparing stakeholders. Let's dig in there because we get a lot of pushback oftentimes when we try to explain that accessible research will be more time consuming, will be more effort. So what's your personal take on audits versus testing with participants on this?
Sure. So that's a great question because audits are quite popular, and especially automated audits, right?
Yeah.
But automated audits don't capture, I don't think, more than like 30% of usability issues. And most audits are only focused on one set of standards. So they use some, like in the US, we would generally see that they use BICAC 2.0. And so they may miss things. And I think it's not a very holistic look at the problems that are encountered. One way to mitigate that is to have a two-person audit team where one of the people who's auditing is a person with disability, working with an able-bodied person who can guide through the audit and understand together what's going on, because you need to make sure that the person with disabilities is aware of content they're missing or features and functionality that they're missing as part of the audit. And the person who does not use assistive technology needs to be aware of how the assistive technology works so that their evaluation isn't just based on the standards, but is based on a real interaction with the site or app or product. That said, you can quickly get to that in sessions with users. So I think if you're going to do an eval, you need to be realistic about what you're going to get out of it. But we would always say that even if you do an eval, you should go back and do some testing. And especially if you do an automated eval, you should go back and do manual evaluation as well, because an automated audit is not going to catch enough of the problems to really problem solve the experience. It may fix something like color contrast or, you know, some things about headers or tagging, but really it helps to see how different people use their assistive technology, because another thing that you will find is that disability is intersectional, and assistive technology becomes intersectional too, right? And so you may see someone using a combination of a sit and puff mouse along with a screen reader in a way that can really break an experience if it's not properly designed for it. And that personalization of assistive technology is something that is important to test in the wild. It is not something that you're going to capture through an evaluation.
That's really great advice. Thank you for that. And you also suggest starting small with pilot studies when tackling accessibility. Could you expand on that? Why is that a good starting point?
Sure. I think everyone can get overwhelmed, right? If they start with, you try to bite off more than you can chew, as we say in the US, you can really run into a whole bunch of cascading issues. So, you know, starting with a very deliberate pilot on a very deliberate set of features or content with a very deliberate set of users, right? You may find that what a person with a vision disability needs is very different than a person with hearing loss. And so to try and tackle everything at once can just really be frustrating and make you feel like you've got more than you can take on. And so we think piloting is nice because you can really confine things and learn about how does a recruit work, how does technology work with this user group, what does timing look like, how do we let people observe in a way that is you know, ethical and you know, not interrupting people, and then I think also that gives you a chance to demonstrate the benefit of this type of research with your stakeholders so they can see that the investment is worthwhile. Because if you can improve outcomes for this, you know, a group of people with disabilities, you may see greater uptake, deeper engagement with your product, and more wider adoption, more, you know, ultimately more sales or more conversion. So using pilots as a way to build internal competency and stakeholder buy-in, and to help you make an argument for your return on investment, I think pilots are very effective that way.
Great. That brings up the next question. What are some common challenges businesses face when trying to improve their product's accessibility, and how do you recommend tackling them?
Yeah. So again, I would say small steps. You know, I think don't try to do everything at once. Look at what your market opportunity is, right? Do you believe that your market opportunity is in a particular space? Is it, you know, I think you look at the Sony PlayStation enhancements and their product that allows people with upper limb mobility issues and disabilities to game, right? That is a very specific business case for where they ought to go, right? Because they can see a return on investment. And so I think looking at where does your business need to play, and then what research is going to help you to figure out how you do need to design something. So do you need to add voice to your solution that may currently not be, you know, supported by a voice assistant? Do you need to provide people with a way to change the font sizes of things? What are the things that are currently barriers in your product that accessible UX could help you find solutions to? And then, you know, from there, once you've got the information from users, you can work on what the solution is to the design problem.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think we should all remember that it's a business. It's not just doing good. It's something that people should think about, and think about opening up new markets for their products when with
Yeah, I mean,
research
the
and
more that you can
design.
show stakeholders that there's money behind it, the easier it is for everyone to make the case for investment, right? And that's what it is. It's where do you come up with the money for people to be trained in this, to take more time in research, to execute more challenging recruits. You make that money back when you improve the design and more people can buy it and use it. So it's a self-fulfilling loop here, in terms of you do need to think about what's the business case. If you really want to get adoption. This, it may be not what we all want to hear or think, because we're very empathetic creatures in user experience, but I think it's important to recognize that these things, we do need to find ways to pay for things.
And there is the money in there. So thank you for that. Let's close this. Could you share a little bit more about how your UX team here at Ipsos supports businesses in creating more accessible user experience?
You bet. So we have a number of different ways. I think the most important one is to just help people get started. So we will come in and kind of look at your current UX practices and say, what could we do? What could we help you do to kind of make this your whole research approach more accessible? We also offer assistive technology testing. So we do usability and accessibility testing with assistive technology, and we have a group of trained researchers that have done these types of recruits and these kinds of sessions, moderated these sessions, and they understand how to report out in a way that's useful. Something else that we do that I think is really important is that we will help build panels to recruit from. So one of the big barriers, as I've already mentioned, is the time it takes to recruit and get people scheduled. And many of our clients have found that one of the ways to reduce that time is by having a panel of people that have self-identified as users of specific types of assistive technology and that are willing to participate. And so we can actually build a panel, we can get them going, and that way when you're ready to do a study, we can tap into that panel rather than starting from scratch every time. And I think something to remember with accessible UX is that, professional testers are not a bad thing in this space. We sometimes try to avoid that in usability and user experience testing and research so that we don't, start to get people just giving us the same answers. But in the case of accessible UX, people who have the experience of being able to get online, to use the tools, to demonstrate the issues with us are a really valuable partner in accessible UX. So we believe that panels are a good way to overcome some of the obstacles of timing and finding people that are going to be able to contribute in a way that's not frustrating for them, So I think those are important. We also do early stage discovery work with people using assistive technology to understand how should a product be built. So before we get to the actual design, what should the product include to make it more accessible? Things like how should closed captioning work? How should screen readers work on this product? How should the layout of pages be designed? So early stage discovery, what we call shifting left, so that we involve people with disabilities earlier in the product development lifecycle, is also an important thing that we can help with. It incorporates many of the same things that accessibility UX testing does in terms of needing to be mindful of the recruit, using assistive technology, and that type of things. But it's really, I think, at the heart of making products more accessible, as I'm going to fail to remember who said it, but right, you can't put the blueberries in a muffin after you've baked it.
That's true.
And so it's a lot harder to retrofit accessibility back into a product. You might completely design a different type of product if you knew that it was going to need to be accessible or that you wanted it to be accessible.
Thank you. I know that in Germany we're working on an inclusive panel and
Yeah.
still straightening out some kinks in there, but I'm looking forward to working with as many people as want to join.
Yeah.
And thank you for this interview and all your great insights.
Happy to help. Thanks for bringing a light to this topic, because we feel like it's a really important thing for us to be pushing forward as we think about how do we make products that are good for all users and not just you know, a subset of people that could potentially use a product. So really happy that we got to talk about this today.
Great. Then I hope you have a great day, and I hope everyone who listens today and watches this video also has a great day. Bye.